Okay, I think we'll make a start. A very warm welcome from me. I'm Andy Pye, consultant editor at DFA Media, who publish Drives and Controls, Smart Machines and Factories, and various other publications. We're here today to talk about digital transformation in industry, and we'll be talking about a number of aspects of that, but principally business benefits and how to make a start with your digitization program. We have 5 excellent speakers, and I'll just name check them in a moment. But before I do that, I will say that we also have my colleague Aaron Bluchstein on the call. He's editor of Smart Machines and Factories, so he'll be helping me with running the session. And in the background, we have Tony Sachs, who's editor of Drives and Controls, who will be helping me keep an eye on the chat so that we can answer the right questions in the right order as they come in. Please feel very free to use the chat and Q&A to put your questions in. We will try to take questions as they arise at the appropriate time, but we may leave some until the end, depending on the nature of the question. So the more you can put into the chat, the better. If you have useful information you want to put into the chat, that's also really good, because it enables us to put together a compendium for all the attendees to benefit from afterwards. But if you are representing a commercial interest, we just ask you to respect that and not to put in blatant sales plugs or commercial things of that nature, so that we can keep it entirely objective as we go through. So thank you for that and your understanding. We have, as I said, 5 excellent speakers, and I'm just going to name check them quickly. We have Professor Sam Turner, HVM Catapult, Keith Atkinson of Weidmuller, Bill Killick, HMS Industrial Networks, Michael Lefervera, Redline Controls, and Sam Tiara of MC Control Systems. So to start with, I'm going to quickly ask them to introduce themselves and in 30 seconds or so, say who they are and what their interest is. So I'm going to start with Sam. Sorry, Sam Tiara. Two Sams.
Good morning. Yeah, I'm Sam Tiara from MCS Control Systems. I've been working in this industry for now 34 years in the control, automation and systems integration sector, if you like. Spent the last 10 years working across Europe, Middle East and Africa. I came back into the UK back in November 2019 and took the role as sales director for MCS Control Systems. And you know, the business MCS has been running for 45, 46 years, building control systems, control panels, motor control centers for virtually every industry sector you can imagine. We have identified in our own manufacturing business a need to improve. And as we've seen the whole topic of Industry 4, there's a head of steam behind that, and we're looking to support that sector as industry to take advantage of Industry 4 technologies.
Thank you. Now we'll move across the channel to Michael Lefervera from Redline Controls.
Good morning, everyone. So I'm Michael Lefervera. Yeah, I'm French. It's nobody's perfect, like I used to say. So I'm a product marketing, regional product marketing for Redline. I work with Redline since 15 years now. I started as a technical support engineers and did several jobs and arrived to this position. So I have a big experience, great experience with networking, with digitalizations and communications and data. Yeah, more or less.
Thank you, Michael. Michael will be covering a very interesting topic later on of how to digitize legacy systems, which I'm sure is going to be extremely interesting. Moving on now to Bill Killick from HMS.
Hi, HMS connects people, machines and data together using gateways and clouds. And I'm in the UK on the sales team.
Thank you very much. And Keith Atkinson, Weidmuller.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. continuing on the theme of people who've been in this industry for a lot of years, I've been in this for approaching 25 years now in various forms, if you like. Currently work for Weidmuller as a member of our Northern European automation team. And our job is really to drive the digitalization narrative and to assist our customers in making the right steps in what can be sometimes quite a confusing environment. Quite often, I guess, if you put 5 people in a room, you get different answers over what digitalization is. And I think probably you might even get that today. So part of our job is in a very consultative fashion to try and assist people and demystify the whole process. So really, that's my role.
That's excellent, Keith, and it leads very nicely to Professor Sam Turner, who's going to introduce himself and then set the scene for us. So he may well cover some of the points you've just made, Keith. Off you go, Sam. You're on mute, sir. There.
Good morning, everybody. That's a great start. So thanks. Yeah, Sam Turner. I've also been about 25 years, in fact, in the manufacturing sector. The vast majority of that in this strange space in between industry and academia, in the innovation space. So I'm the CTO of the High Value Manufacturing Catapult. I'm just going to share a couple of slides with you, actually, as I talk through this. So we're a network of manufacturing innovation centres in the UK. We have around, we have 7 centres, around 4,000 people, over $1 billion of assets. We have factory-like facilities working in the manufacturing innovation space. So essentially, that's about helping industry mature, integrate, deploy technology that drives performance in the manufacturing sector for the UK. And digitalisation is a huge part of that. So my background, I've worked in our centres, worked across a range of sectors, and working quite heavily in the digital space. And yeah, we're partly government funded and available really to support UK manufacturing. So that's manufacturers and the developers and deployers of manufacturing, providers of manufacturing technology as well. I'm going to give probably nearly 4 or 5 different interpretations of digitalisation here as well, as per Keith's point earlier. But thinking about different use cases for digital transformation. So as part of our mission is industrial transformation, and digitalisation is at the heart of that. We see one of those use cases being at the design stage, certainly looking at how we can use digital tools to optimise design and the digital thread that starts to think about breaking down barriers between design and manufacturing and in-service performance. So if we can gather data from manufacturing performance or in-service performance, relate it back to design, we can start to enhance productivity or performance of the assets we're designing. So if you're an OEM designing products, then the suite of digital tools and the connectivity through the life cycle can have a huge impact on business performance. The bottom left-hand cluster of graphics here lead on from that, looking at business model transformation. So as you start to look at moving into the space where perhaps you're capturing data through life, got examples from automotive there. If you think about the Tesla model now, where you buy a vehicle with a guaranteed actually have higher performance over its life cycles, you start to upgrade due to enhanced digital performance and productivity. So that relationship between design, manufacture, and through life gives some really exciting opportunities wherever you sit in the value chain. And also looking at how digital tools, if you're a manufacturer who excels in a particular manufacturing process, be that machining, forging, casting, automation, how can you start to bottle some of the capability you have in the people in your organization and put that into decision support systems that mean actually you can scale it more readily. A huge part, of course, of digital transformation use cases in manufacturing is about manufacturing performance and productivity. So we've got examples of intelligent automation here, formulation in chemical labs, looking at things like assisted assembly using visualization techniques, and optimized process control for otherwise automated processes like machine tools. And this is a bulk of the work we do, probably is in that space currently. And then also there's the growing need to build net zero supply chains and net zero manufacturing, which is something that I think many people are struggling with where to start. And there's a huge role for digital tools in capturing, single source of truth data around embodied emissions in materials coming into manufacturing supply chain and factory, in how we report emissions in factory, and also, of course, using digital systems to optimize for resource efficiency and energy efficiency, and this alongside productivity and quality and the usual kind of targets we'd have. So there's a range of technologies in here, from communications platforms, have open architectures to enable interoperability is crucial. So we recognize there's a whole suite of solution providers and great options on the market, but if they don't speak to each other, it's difficult to know where to start, and the constraints that prevent getting the best out of the systems and solutions available to us. Of course, AI, machine learning techniques, applying that to things like advanced robotics, is how we start to derive some of the value from that data, but capturing the data, processing it, creating clean data is a crucial starting point. Data visualization as well is really important. So we see a lot of applications actually using things like augmented reality digital tools, probably more than virtual reality, where we're assisting physical operations that aren't normally automated, but we're providing greater robustness, guidance to operators. And also means we can capture data around otherwise unautomated manufacturing processes, but enables flexibility without an operator having to have the detailed skill across a whole range of operations. Which leads on to a big trend now on digital twins. There's a huge amount of hype around digital twins, but there's an opportunity here as well. And this, for us, a digital twin is combining a physical asset with a digital model, with an interaction between the two. So a digital twin of a manufacturing system or process will be taking real life production data, feeding it into the model, which enhances the model's prognostics and predictive capability, which helps you make decisions, which can then change the way you either flow goods around the factory, even change the control systems potentially on a manufacturing process or automation process. And of course, also the design stage, where we can actually gather data from manufacturing performance back into the design phase. So and Catapult provide a lot of support. There's a lot in the ecosystem here. I'll talk a bit more about this at the end and wrap up, but helping to understand the innovation journey and what kind of, whether disruptive innovation, whether we're trying to look at iterative, where you're bringing technologies in to drive productivity, performance improvement, thinking about design, helping with workforce skills. So both those, bringing the digital skills into companies on the shop floor and helping leaders understand where the business case lies for investment in digital technologies. And looking at how digital tools can bring new technologies to market, like this example of a NFQ application for tracking goods through factories and supply chains, or looking at scale up of manufacturing supply chains using digital tools to rapidly scale, to compress the life cycle, bringing new solutions to market at scale. And we've also got a network of test beds where we can bring in technology, test it, demonstrate it, de-risk it, and run quick fire projects across a whole range of sectors and processes, from additive manufacturing to legacy systems, connectivity to the chemical sector, which means then we can de-risk solutions that can be rapidly deployed and really hold hands for manufacturers in starting the digital journey. So yeah, that's the end of the opening pitch. I think you're on mute now, Andy.
There we go. Schoolboy error. I was on mute. Yeah, thank you very much for that, Sam. I mean, it's almost mind-boggling, all the the speed which you've covered so many aspects, and with so many techniques to deal with. Some of the questions might be, how do they speak to each other? Is a digital twin the answer, or is it the only answer, or are there other approaches? Because it seems to me that to get the best benefit out of digitalization, it needs to be right across the enterprise, and not just in small parts, but equally getting people into it might well be by starting small. So just quickly, Sam, do you have any further thoughts on that sort of side of it?
Well, two views there, which I agree with both really. The biggest benefit comes from enterprise-wide transformation, definitely, but that's very difficult to know where to start. So we do advocate starting small. I recognise that was a rapid run through, but some of the things we have there in terms of point solutions and demonstrators and test beds is a great place to start. Looking at think about a problem you have in your factory right now, a real challenge, not where do I start with digital, but what are the challenges I'm trying to fix in my company right now? And what are the tools that help me to address that challenge? So I think starting small with a real need and business case, look at the tools that are available to help you do that. And then you can start to think about a longer journey that leads to enterprise-wide transformation.
So generally, it's likely to be that way round. Aaron, you've got a comment.
Yeah, I was just going to say that listening to you, I would say that one of the biggest issues with regards to digital transformation is actually getting people on board, because so many companies, so many people are so entrenched in their daily routine, their processes, that to actually the actual challenge is to get people to get on board, to recognize when that's something that actually needs to change. Would you agree with that? Or
absolutely. I think again, maybe I've shared a breadth of opportunities there, which may also seem mind-boggling, as Andy said. But the point is, it can go a long way. But the starting point, digital isn't something you have to do tomorrow when you've got your head around it. It's a suite of solutions that can help you address the problems you're trying to fix now. So particularly the right-hand box out in that chart around solutions for performance and competitiveness, either improving quality, reducing lead time, reducing cycle times. There's a lot of solutions out there that can help improving machine uptime and prognostics around for maintenance. There's a huge range of use cases that we can bring solutions to bear for right now, problems that you're probably trying to fix within your company with other means. So that is the place to start, I think, is think about what you need to address anyway and where can digital help, rather than think about why you have to go digital.
Can I make a comment just on that one, Sam?
Yes, please, Sam. Yeah.
We've been in this industry for now 30 to 40 years, and one of the things we realised when you're looking at the application of factory automation, where you sort of improve the automation of manual processes on a machine-by-machine basis. But what we found, a lot of industry find that they build these little silos of data. And what we're seeing is lots of businesses that have these little isolated islands of data that then have to be connected. And one of the pieces of advice we do give customers, if you are looking to resolve a particular operational problem, is look at the end, keep the end in mind, because you will look to need to connect all of these isolated maybe islands of new data that need to come together to allow you to be able to predict the performance of a business over the longer term. So there's a need for a bottom-up approach to actually fix the problem, but also maybe keep in mind the top-down approach about the whole enterprise.
Yeah, that's very good.
I would like to make a comment, Andy, if you don't mind.
Yes, please. Yeah, no.
So on the first step you mentioned, Sam, you say, okay, the first step is a very important step. I'm agree with you, and our experience, what we see on the field, it's the most successful experience is when the people only digitalize what they do manually. So the first step is really, you keep what you do manually, you have exactly the same data, you get exactly the same data, but everything digitalized. And you don't try to put too much at the first step, because otherwise the human level is not capable of adapting quickly enough, and they don't show interest to it because it's too complex. And if you keep the same system as they used to do manually with Excel documents or paper and everything, and you just do it digitally, you just digitalize this process and do it on live, I mean, it's well accepted by the teams. It's really the field experience we have.
Thank you, Michael.
Can I ask Sam? Is that okay? I just Sam, I'm kind of. How do you know if you've done a good job? I'm just wondering, because it's such a big. You've got such a massive scope, haven't you? I'm just wondering. Can you give us an example of when you get home and you think, yes, you know that you've done a really good, you got a massive success. Obviously, probably not that day, but in time, and that's just such a tick because you've achieved what you needed to.
Yeah, well, there's such a range of projects we deliver. Some of them are really long term, some short term, but the satisfying ones are often those. Real satisfaction is those shorter term projects where you've got a real challenge on the shop floor. Now, an example was I visited a company who were trying to understand where they could apply digital tools. And we started with, well, what's the business challenge right now? And one of the challenges was about reducing lead time so that they can actually increase market share, get higher up the supply chain. And going around, looking around the shop floor and identifying, well, where can digital tools help you in terms of tool and die changeover and reducing some of the uncertainty around that. Looking at automation applications. So looking at, what's the top 3 challenges on a shop floor for a company, and identifying a solution that might be, a monitoring solution, maybe an automation solution that you put in place, and then you come back in a few weeks, months time, and you've actually fixed that. You've reduced the cycle time, you've reduced cost and lead time. Putting those point solutions in place is really satisfying. So, you've basically hit the business case. So part of this is about helping with return on investment as well.
Thank you. Right, we're starting to get some questions coming in, so that's great. I won't take them straight away, but just a point to please do send us your comments, your questions. We've got an excellent panel here who are desperate to impart their expertise to you. So more questions, comments, and thoughts that you can put in the chat, the more lively our discussion's going to be. We have some people on the panel with a lot of experience of working in the field, and we're now going to ask Keith Atkinson, the first of those from Weidmuller, to impart some to us. His title is about a digitization journey, where to start from design to commission, and he's also going to talk a little bit about bridging the OT and IT data worlds. So over to you, Keith.
Thanks, Andy. When we first looked at the content for this particular session, one of the questions that was on the bullet point list was that for some reason in the UK particularly, we seem to be lagging behind a little bit the rest of continental Europe or the world in terms of what we're doing with digitalization. Now, whilst that might be true, and if it is true, I don't know, I haven't seen the figures personally, it wouldn't be a great surprise to me, because whenever you see particular trends in industry that have come along over the last kind of 15 or 20 years, be it functional safety or energy saving or bus networks or what have you, there always seems to be this lag to me that we kind of play catch up. And I think it's probably because as a country in engineering terms, sometimes we're a little bit conservative in how we go about things. We haven't liked change or fast change in the past. And we're always a little bit suspicious of when manufacturers, like people like myself, come along and knock on the door and say, we've got this great thing, will you have a look at it? But there's always a suspicion there that it's an attempt to sell a box. And yeah, to a certain extent that's true, but we are driven by industry trends at the end of the day. I also read an article at the start of this week, which I think was created or written by Siemens. And Siemens said, this article said, that approximately 65% of all digitalization efforts fail. I was quite surprised by that. But surprised, but not, if you like, because if you look at things like energy saving in the past, I've heard some horrendous stories of people who've just gone around a plant and installed variable speed drives on things and expected to get an energy saving benefit and haven't. So I think for us as a manufacturer that's trying to drive this, we've got to have 2 or 3 different pillars at which we try and assist. For me personally, digitalization is really a continuation of something that's been going on for 20 years. A lot of manufacturers in industry have this totally integrated approach, shop floor to boardroom type integrated approach, with the breadth of products and solutions that they supply. So this digitalization narrative for me takes this to the next step. One of the things that we're not short of in automation and in wider industry is data. Yeah, absolutely bombarded by data. We have loads of production data, loads of sensor data. Every device that you see these days has pretty much some sort of I/O link or field bus connectivity. Taking for example ourselves, we have power supplies now at 24 volt level, which it would be easier to tell you what information they don't give you than tell you what they do. So you can't really blame people for being confused about what digitalization means and how they implement a solution and how they use this huge raft of data in order to get the best benefit out of it. That's the biggest challenge. So for us, there are three pillars. There's a consultative pillar. Okay, and I'll start with that shortly. There is a data gathering pillar. And then as Sam alluded to at the beginning, there's a modeling approach. There's this digital twin approach. So if we look at the consultative approach, for example, this has been a learning process for Weidmuller, and it's still something that we are going through as a company. And we've put tremendous amounts of time and effort from a sales point of view when we contact our customers and we talk to our customers on a daily basis, that the conversations are more about understanding what the customer does than what we do. Yeah, and that's very difficult for salespeople because salespeople like to go and show people how good they are, and they like to take a box or a bag of equipment along and shake it and say, this is great, this is the best thing that we've ever done. How many do you want to buy? And the reality is, we need to do more than that with digitalization. And so from a sales point of view, we've become very consultative. It's the old adage of having one mouth and two ears. We've got those for a reason. So we'll spend quite a lot of time understanding what people's issues are. And sometimes you've got to say to people, I don't understand your industry, I don't understand the process, can you explain it to me? And as you get down that road, you pick up on what the drivers are likely to be, and what requirements are likely to be for the implementation of a successful digitalization strategy. Going wider than that, we have a team of people in the UK and in Europe that do something that we call connectivity consultancy. And there are many strings to that bow. But basically what it does is it looks at things like, yes, it looks at panel design techniques. It looks at tooling techniques. It looks at EMC techniques in panel build and things like that. It looks at smart features and diagnostic coverage within a control panel. But it does something more than that. It starts to look at the digitalization of the design process. So when people are using CAD techniques or things like ePlan, for example, we've put tremendous resource into designing a software tool which will enable you to interface with, for example, ePlan. Not picking ePlan particularly, but it is a good fit. From either side, either from our design side or from the ePlan design side, so that if you do your schematics, your GAs and stuff, you can export the data from one platform to another. In our case, our software does real design, so all of our automation components and our core components can be built onto a control system rail or a panel. They can be put in a box, and it's a quite detailed design tool. And then that can be taken to ePlan in order to create the wiring diagrams for the panel. And we have quite a extensive support for product within ePlan. Equally, you can work with other CAD packages. But what we do with the digitalization of the design process is to then expand it so that if you design a control panel, you do all your usual things like your marking of terminals or power supplies or relays in a panel. You can then export that through our printing software to the production of markers and the production of cable identifiers and things like that. when you're doing that sort of design as well, what I found when I worked in systems integration is one of the biggest drains on people when they're either proposing a solution or building a solution is getting hold of data sheets for documentation. If you put a technical file together, then you can be hunting around on the internet for the right PDF, and then you've got to cut and paste it and all the rest of that. And that takes time. So the design tools that we use, once you've done a panel design, put all the PDFs for every component into a single zip file on your desktop. So it's a case of speeding up the design process, because we realize that in this world now, it's a very commercially driven world, and that most of our customers have got the commercial terms to a level where there isn't a great deal of maneuver for either of us. We have to look for other ways of saving and helping our customer. And one of the ways we do that is by speeding up and digitalizing the design process. And there are a couple of consultants in the UK that are able to do that. We think, if you design a control panel, you could save a couple of hours by using these approaches. And being blunt about it, you've got to sell a lot of terminals in order to make the same levels of savings that you can do if you're saving a couple of hours on a control panel design. So there is that angle there, but it's also about making people more efficient. Over and above that, when we start talking about the wider digitalization narrative, we sometimes have to have a means of collecting data if data doesn't already exist. So from a purely hardware perspective, we have within our automation range now power supplies with communications capability. We have cloud connectable controllers, as a lot of manufacturers do. Everything that we're doing these days has got some degree of intelligence in it. We have plans for wireless vibration sensors and stuff with Node-RED connectivity and MQTT connectivity. So even at the lowest level, it's about data collection and making data available. Now, this hardware journey has been one heck of a journey for Videmother as well. And the range is ever expanding to a point where part of our battle is making people aware of what we've got to offer. And again, you introduce that through the consultative approach. At the back end of that consultative approach, you'll say, oh, yeah, okay, I understand that. Maybe we can help you in this direction. But it's not about shifting the box. It's about a package. It's about a solution. And it's about confidence and competence for us to exist in that environment. So, the first step is really not about a part number. It's about a process or, a requirement more than anything else. The breadth of product now really goes from everything, as I say, from intelligent power supplies right up to SCADA systems and automated machine learning. So I would say, we are not a Siemens or a Rockwell. But we have an offering at all of those levels, and it's worth having a conversation, because there's a lot of experience that's not driven by product push within our organization. The final pillar, I would say, is the last thing that Sam alluded to, which is this digital twinning narrative. And at the top of the tree sits something which I'm responsible for in the UK, which is automated machine learning software. So effectively, that takes in all of this process data and it doesn't require a lot of specialist knowledge in order to produce a model which can be used to give predictive maintenance and predictive failure data outputs to anybody's SCADA system. So effectively, what you do is you would bring in a spreadsheet of process data which is time-stamped. So if you imagine a typical process plant, for example, pressures and temperatures and that sort of thing. You then trend those process parameters, and effectively, with a bit of engineering knowledge, which you've got to have, you mark up those trends with where the data is good and bad. So you say, well, this pressure is going out of alignment, I'll mark that up as bad, and that's within tolerance. And you do that multiple times for multiple different process parameters. And then 4 or 5 algorithms are generated using different types of statistical process control, and they are scored on their basis of being able to detect errors and anomalies, and then suitability to provide a predictive maintenance approach. And then there's a bit more to it than that, but you take it to, you can take the output of that through an open backend to whatever SCADA system, DCS system, or whatever. So there are three distinct areas: this ongoing hardware evolution, the digital twinning, and also the consultative approach, which positions us in a very good place to be able to have these discussions and demystify this the whole process for people. So I think that's, in summary, where we sit as a company.
Thank you very much, Keith. I've put down the gauntlet of your 65% failure into the chat, and we'll see what comes back. But there is a very active discussion going on now, covering issues of digitization, digitalization, and the effects of people. We'll come back to all that. I'd like to take Bill's contribution now, because it's related to that topic, and then we'll have a round robin comment session after that before going on to the next two speakers. So Bill, does digitization start with a compelling fix or a need to modernize, or what?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I know the answer yet, but I'll take you through the journey that I've been on a couple of weeks, in the last couple of weeks, and I'm actually going to start with the Queen, because people joke, don't they, that the Queen thinks the world smells of paint, because just before she visits, everyone's frantically painting everything. So her experience is kind of affected by that. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But I do think that each of us have this sort of, obviously our filter is based on what we've seen. So I don't know about that 65%, but we'll come on to that. But from my point of view, my experience is dealing with kind of mid-level engineers and process designers, because, you know, we do protocol to protocol conversions, dashboarding, data into the cloud, that kind of thing. So I don't have that kind of top level strategic discussion with business leaders. So I have to admit, I started off being a little bit more cynical and thinking, and also thinking maybe that people out there will be not totally convinced that it is actually in reality a top down. I think we want it to be, because that's what it sounds like it should be, but is it really? But I did a lot of research on it, and there are countless examples of massive success led by the top. I read about Engie. I think is that a French company, Michael? I think it's a French energy company. Enel is an Italian one. I think they're the second biggest in the world. They did smart meters first. Caterpillar, a whole load of other companies where they have had a truly visionary leader at the top that understands exactly what they need. They've delegated a lot of responsibility, but they've kept the focus, and they've actually had some success. So I was sort of trying to relate these two things together, where people sometimes have a pain and an immediate need versus a sort of top-down strategic thing. And in my mind, I've summarized it as a bit of a graph, and I'm not going to be able to do it properly on here, but if you imagine the axis like this, I think there's two things. There's pain, which really is flat, because whenever you solve a pain, you're just going to get another one. And even if you improve your business so that you get less pain, you'll redefine your requirements so that that pain is relatively the same all the time. So although that sounds a little bit depressing, the fact is, there is your pain curve. But your awareness of the benefit of digital transformation is like that, because each day you understand more. Each day you find out more about a company that's either had success or failed. So there's a break-even point. And that's obviously, you've got to define that, but I think it's quite a nice concept to say at some point, your awareness of the benefit outweighs your immediate panic about that pain. And that is the point that you personally will adopt digital transformation. And I think you can kind of use that within your own organization. So you can think, well, where am I with that? Where is that person? Where are the top guys? And you can also use it to compare yourself with your competitors and with other people in industry. It's a bit sort of somewhere between qualitative and quantitative, because how do you define that? But if you can think to yourself, this person is so buried in their pain, it doesn't matter what I talk to them about, they're not going to see it. Whereas somebody else might be able to be educated in the digital transformation. That increases the curve and brings that date in, which means they'll be more ready to adopt it. So that is sort of, I felt like that was quite a good concept for understanding how that immediate pain and the strategic vision will actually work together. And the other thing, which we touched on already, is that we're not talking about digital improvement. We're talking about transformation. And when you look that up, there's various different definitions, but transformation mostly is about a complete change, a total difference. It's not really even just a step change, it's a transformation. And I don't think it's digital at all, actually. I think it's a business transformation using digital building blocks. And my sort of other thing is thinking some of what we've already been talking about, and also a whole load of people with all the comments. I think there's a lot of people that are going to have that vision, but they're going to be in that situation where they can't effect the total change. So what do? Because you don't want to cause chaos, do you? You don't want to fix lots of different things all in a different way, but sometimes you just can't wait for the vision to come down. So what do you do? And this is my other sort of concept that I've been thinking is, if you redefine this as business transformation using digital building blocks, then that means you can try to guess what the business strategy will be coming down from the top, but you can have a much better scope of your digital building block. And all you've got to do is solve your immediate need using a digital building block that you know will comply with the business transformation strategy once it happens. And that also has the advantage that you're doing that with your curve. You're increasing your awareness and therefore pulling that data in for yourself and for everyone else around you. So those two kind of concepts, I think, work together really. Increase your business awareness, and then that sort of outweighs the pain. And then redefine digital transformation as business transformation using digital building blocks. And then that kind of thing really is, you know, if you comply with basic principles of digital transformation, so for instance, you need to be, as much as you can, vendor independent. You need to have control of your own data and harness the power of your own data. You need to harness the power of Internet of Things. In fact, I don't know if this is a term, but I've kind of come up with Internet of Data as well as Internet of Things. I don't know if that's a real thing, but I think it should be. Because data, I mean, Keith, you were talking about it earlier, data is so valuable and we're getting more and more of it. But what we've recognized is connecting things together opens up a massive possibility, because sharing, that's what Internet of Things is. It's sharing. You're sharing wiring, you're sharing control, you're sharing data, you're sharing all these things. But if there was this concept of Internet of Data, I think we would kind of focus more in on it and understand the concept of it. So when you're waiting for that business transformation strategy to come down, solve your immediate need with a digital building block using those general principles: Internet of Things, harness the power of your own data, make sure you've got the ability to analyze your own data, so Internet of Data really, and then obviously be aware of user experience and social media and apps, because all of those things are where it's going to end up, regardless of what that business strategy is. And then I think that sort of relates those two issues together. Is it top down or is it bottom up? Is it immediate need or strategy? You can kind of do something today with all of that in mind. And I think there's kind of like a couple of stories I want to say. I've been reading up about Kodak because it's one of the obvious ones of transformation. You know, they were in the instant photo business. They were doing extremely well, and then suddenly they fell over almost overnight. It's one of those sort of cases that people study. Why did they fall over overnight? Because people started using digital cameras. Do you know who invented the digital camera? An engineer at Kodak. And they decided they didn't really want it because it wasn't really their thing. Kodak decided they were in the instant photo market, but they should have been in the memories market. So that's another thing. You've got to increase your scope. And if you're any kind of business leader, but we talk about empowering people to do this, you've got to empower the creative people, because those are the ones that will say all the weirdy things. They'll say all the things that don't really make sense in your business. And that's what you want, because you don't want improvement, you want transformation. So I think that's kind of where I've been heading with my thinking. And I would just like to close with the very well-known story about the two guys on safari. Let's say two people on safari, actually, it doesn't have to be guys. And they're going on a photo shoot, we'll say, and they're competing for the best photo. And they leave the main group, go off on their own, very ill-advised. And they're doing some wildlife photography, and suddenly they come across a group of very hungry lions. For the purposes of the story, they are the most hungry lions. So they start running away, and all of a sudden, one of them stops and changes his safari boots into trainers. And the other one says, I don't know why you're bothering. You'll never outrun the lions. And he says, I don't need to outrun the lions, only you, and runs off. And that is really the biggest thing you need to take from this. Is it's not really about sort of outrunning the lions. It's about outrunning the competition. You need to bring that curve in, and you need to do it, because otherwise you'll end up like a Kodak.
Yeah,
that's
brilliant,
as far as
Bill, and a really good opportunity now, I think, to have a round robin discussion based on the points you've made. I was a little bit worried about your efforts to show graphs with your arms, and I had my finger on the pulse in case I needed to call for an ambulance, but you got through it very well. We've also got some comments, related to that in the chat. Ian Gardner is making a number of comments, but I'd expect a top-down, bottom-up approach in unison, which in essence backs up what you're saying, and you can't do one before the other. Can I introduce Sam Turner just to comment on that first, and then we'll go around the other speakers for their kind of comments on what you covered there. And you're on mute,
right?
Sam.
Yeah.
Hey.
Going for a hat trick. So, in terms of the top-down, bottom-up approach, is that your question, Andy?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. So, no, I agree, and Sam made the point earlier as well that you need to do both. I think so. Also, I agree entirely with what Bill said about transformation. Transformation is business transformation using digital tools. I think it's a great way of putting it. So I agree with that entirely. I think any use of digital tools or digitalization is about equipping yourselves with the tools and the skills to deliver transformation or improvement into the business. Sam made a great point earlier that if you start only bottom up, that you don't get the kind of network effect, the full benefit of integrating different solutions, and you can end up with a confused mess of different data sets and platforms. So you do need some sort of architectural overview of where your destination is, and also what's the transformation you're trying to deliver. Where's the business going? Where's the business going? What do we need to equip the business for the future? How do we design that? But then I think it's still starting small to prove the benefit, partly for those within the business, but to convince leaders, finance directors, but also those working on the shop floor that the solutions are there and beneficial. And I think it maybe depends on the size of the business, I suppose. I think so. Top down, bottom up in parallel is the ideal approach, I believe. A view of where you're going, a view of that destination and what you need to put in place, and then testing that. But I'm conscious for some companies, they're not sure where to start with that top-down view, and the bottom-up maybe an easier starting place. But you need both, because the transformation doesn't come from bottom-up only. It comes from the bottom-up, gives you the confidence, the skills, the confidence to invest again, but it's system-wide where you're going to deliver transformation.
Sam, if a company, for example, a very small SME, and they're only starting out on the transformation journey. How do they know, and it's coming back to Bill really, how do they know what the actual digital building blocks they should be approach and what they should be looking at if they have no experience and they want to look at starting the journey? How would they, what do they do? Because they're obviously, they're concerned about they're going to fall behind, but they don't have that experience to know where to go. What would you say to them?
Yeah, I think I've actually put something in the chat that's it's a Gov UK 7 lenses of transformation. It's a little bit political, and they talk about how they've had amazing success. But it's quite an interesting way of looking at it. And they talk about the trade-offs. They talk about what you can expect at each stage. But it's quite a nice summary of all the different things you have to consider as a start. I think that one's a really good one. Another one I've just come across actually is Raj Ramesh on YouTube. And he's like a doodler actually, but he's clearly very clever. And within one page, he draws digital transformation. And you watch it build up. It's only about 3 minutes long. But if you look up digital transformation by Raj Ramesh, you can see him draw all the different things, all the factors, change management, all the people, everything's sort of in one overview. And for me, I do think I'm a real overviewy person. I do like that. You need detailed people, obviously, to dive in. But it's so important to get that overview. I never forget another company. I was in a massive team of people from all over the place doing an ERP. And we started looking at a snagging list. And after an hour, somebody said, can I just say, we're on number 5 and we've taken an hour and there are 180 on the list. So we'll be here till next Saturday if we keep doing what we do. And because detailed people will plunge straight in, whereas overview people have an overview. So you've got to have that balance. In terms of the sort of specific technologies, if you look up people like Oracle, there's a very well-known book that I will look up in a minute and put down about digital transformation. And they all talk about 6 or 7 things that are general principles that you should use. In fact, I made a list about, I think I said them earlier, multi-cloud, own your own data, get analytics, consider user experience of the whole scope of your project. That's customers, suppliers, stakeholders. Don't forget that social media and apps will drive you regardless of whether you want them to or not. Internet of Things and vendor independence. If you get those things within a building block, then you kind of haven't gone wrong, because whatever somebody decides to, I'll give you an example. We've got a product that collects data, makes dashboards, sends alarms, that kind of thing. Now that might solve an immediate problem, but it's not digital transformation. But it also sends data to the cloud, to anyone's cloud. Now, immediately it does that, you've got a kind of vendor independence, because if you fall out with us, you can remove one of those bits of system, but you have the data. You have the control of that bit, and you can replace that bit. So please don't, but you can. So you have that kind of vendor independence. You also have the data. So if you look at those sort of the list of things that all the big people say, look up the case of NG, look up the case of NL, Caterpillar, look up what Oracle have done. In fact, that might be online. There was the 10 best things you need to do. You can find a big commonality about what everybody says. Consider all of these things before you start. And I think you've reduced your risk by 50% already if you do that.
I mean, do you think though that I remember going? Okay. So I was just very quickly. I mean, I remember going to an exhibition a few years ago, and there was this stand that said you could buy the Internet of Things for like 200 euros. And then some people think, oh, hey, okay, I'll Internet Industry 4.0 for 200 euros. Thank you very much. And if you have no idea what it actually means, then you'll be tempted to buy that and think that's it. Thank you very much.
And that's partly where the confusion comes.
Yeah. I'm very conscious of time, but just quickly, Sam and Keith, if you have any comments, then I'd like to move forward to Michael.
Yeah, I've got a quick comment. You know, with all of the information out there in the marketplace, and there was a comment made, I think Keith might have made it earlier. Why have 65% of projects failed? You know, what is that failure? You know, which industries does that actually affect? You know, is it disproportionate to SMEs against larger industrials? You know, it'd be quite interesting to find out what's behind that data, because that can actually, it puts fear amongst companies when they start to see data or, you know, statistics like that. So that's one thing I would just do, is to try to understand exactly how that's all happened and what's actually driven all of that. The second thing is, certainly with the larger industrials, you know, you've got a lot more resources within those businesses to onboard, you know, quite a significant external resource, or even develop your own internal resources. But what does an SME do? You know, quite often the management structure within an SME is limited to the CEO and a few directors. And if they're running the business every single day and they're coming across all of this data about Industry 4.0, the smart factory, the connected factory, the factory of the future, where do they go? You know, who do they talk to about that? Now, there's also companies that, you know, that have been established for 20, 30, 40 years that need to make this journey against other businesses. And I came across one called Zinger. It's a small automotive manufacturing company in the US where they 3D print their cars. You know, they're on totally different ends of the digital spectrum. But if we look at the UK being somewhat behind the curve, and you only have to look at reports done by the World Economic Forum that will indicate that we're quite low down, you know, in the league table. How do you actually increase the level of education in the marketplace? So that's one thing you know, we've been sort of toying around internally within the business. Secondly is, where is your leadership? You know, if you want a digital strategy to be successful, you know, you've got to have a vision. You need to have that leadership team in place, and you really need to get the people on board. Because if you get smaller businesses with 10, 20, 30, 50 people, how are they going to adapt to the change? Especially if they've been in place doing the same job, you know, for decades. And suddenly you deploy technology because it's just been thrown top down as a business strategy, and suddenly the entire business has to actually sort of gear itself up for that. And, you know, COVID has indicated the well-being of people, you know, the health and safety and so on is probably a bigger topic now than it's ever been. You know, so there's lots of competing factors. And one of the things that, you know, that was a problem for our collective within MCS and our group of companies that we brought together, was how do you actually solve that problem? And I think Bill raised a point about these little building blocks. You know, we've taken that concept to be able to identify how you sequence those sort of building blocks in a logical fashion so that you actually get the right outcomes. But I think it has to start off with, who do you involve in the digital journey up front? Is it a small group of people, or is it across the board? And that's one of the discussions, unfortunately, I think technical companies don't tend to have that often. And we as integrators, you know, we don't sell we deploy technologies. We don't produce all the technologies. So we're very conscious that people play an increasingly big part in this whole journey, whether you're implementing it on behalf of somebody or whether you're actually the recipient of all of that.
Thank you. Any quick comments, Keith, before I move to Michael?
Yeah, just a couple of very quick ones on the topic of top down or bottom up. I agree, you have to have a strategy for both. In my personal experience, the sorts of customers that I'm dealing with in digitalization, it's surprising actually that one of the industries that has historically been very, very conservative takes a lot of my time, and that is the UK process industry. You know, the process industry gets a terrible rap for being very, very conservative, but they see digitalization and the digitalization narrative as being something fundamental to their long-term strategy in terms of you know, being able to improve their competitiveness and to increase their diagnostic coverage across many platforms that process industries need to manage. So in that regard, a large amount of that is driven from the top down. A large of it focuses around life cycle, and a large amount of it focuses around asset management. So in terms of who you're all engaging with, we are engaging with people that we'd never engaged with before. We're engaging with asset managers and people of that nature, people who are very, very focused on life cycle. And for us, it's a different approach, it's different conversations, but it does seem to be driving the change in that particular environment. There is one other thing I want to say very, very quickly, and that is there was a question came in on the chat from John Mackey, and he said, do you think there's a skills pillar as well as part of an approach to digitalization?
Definitely.
I have to be honest, I do up to a point. I think if you look at some of our industries, we all know that if people are, and some particularly you'll know this, Paul, that when you look to recruit new engineers these days, and over the last 10 years, if you've gone out to try and get new control engineers, they're of a particular age. Yeah. To get a really good control engineer who can stand on his own 2 feet and manage his project in a systems integrator, you're looking at guys that are in their mid-40s and early 50s and stuff. You know, there is undoubtedly and has been a skills gap. In terms of pushing the digitalization narrative, let's be honest, if you're in an end user plant and you're in your late 40s and early 50s and you might be on a good pension scheme and so on and so forth, you're not going to want to upset anybody by pushing a narrative that might go bang in your face. However, what I do see is with the new generation of engineers that are now coming up, and some of which have joined Weidmuller, by the way, these engineers, a young generation of engineers, mid-20s and early 30s, have grown up surgically attached to an iPad, and they see the benefits of increasing amounts of data and digitalization in our daily life. So I don't think it's a generational thing as well. For the younger generation of engineers coming up, I don't think it holds as much fear for them. And I think if we are behind now, it'll not be too long before we're kind of on a par with and catching up with the rest of Europe and the rest of the world. Personally, that's my opinion. That's a
positive, yeah. That's a nice positive approach, and perhaps the only problem is we need some more of them, really. But
sure.
Certainly they have the right skills. Michael, I mean, taking up that point to a degree, and then moving on to your piece, Justine has put in some interesting comments in the chat. One is about people management, which we've touched on. The other one is the original comment about how the UK is lagging behind major economies. She says that she quotes a reference which says that the UK is lagging behind major economies such as Germany and the US, but on a par with the rest of developed Europe. And I think that probably broadly agrees with what you and I discussed earlier when we were having our pre-meeting, that you felt that France was on a par with the UK, and perhaps meaning that neither country is really as far advanced as we would like it to be. So you might want to comment quickly on that, and then move on to your specialist topic of legacy machines, which is about how to pass data onto the shop floor and use it effectively, given the number of elderly machines that we need to introduce into the digital sphere.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, what I can observe between France and UK, we're quite in the same progression with industry 4.0 digital industry. We are the same step. We have same kind of industry with can be very old with old technologies and new technologies. So yeah, we are in a similar stage. I mean, we see Germany is really in front. US it's really different. I mean, US it's really another business. They don't think in the same way as us, and they can be very in advance but very late on the other part. It's very different. But if we focus on Europe, yeah, Germany is really in front. I mean, as always. But from my understanding and my vision, yeah, UK and France are really at the same level. Yeah, with exceptions, but in general.
Thank you. So we broadly agree on that one.
Yeah.
Tell us about legacy machines and your experience with that.
Yeah, so yeah, legacy machines. So we talk a lot about strategy, and we've talked a lot about what we can achieve with these digital transformations, and yeah, that's it's not a dream, but that's a good target. The thing is, when you go on the field, they are not at this level. I mean, the first problem they have is how to collect data. That's very basic, but how to collect data on legacy machine. We have to keep in mind that most of the industry in France and UK runs machine can be older than 30 or 40 years old. I mean, yeah, machines can be very old, and sometimes they don't even have communication technology on board. So and don't even have a PLC. So all this data, and most of the time this machine is the central machine, because this machine does something unique and you can't change it because nobody is able to reproduce it or something like this, or it's too expensive. So this really the machine you have to monitor, and you have to I'd say that to improve and be careful about it. So that's really the machine you have to connect to make your production stable. So yeah, that's one thing the people, when they start a digital transformation, they have to consider is how I'm going to collect my data on the field, and how I'm going to connect all these different PSC generation, all these different technologies. How I'm going to connect that, because connect machine together, it's a challenge. It's not like at home you put the Wi-Fi and job done. No, it's you can have a lot of interference, sometimes struggle with the network and everything. So yeah, it's when I walk on the field, talk with people, they see the advantage of digital transformation, but there is the first step is how I'm going to connect all these machines. It's a big challenge. So of course there is a lot of technologies. We propose, of course, technologies to connect. I mean, basic signals, basic let's say that process signal, digital input, digital outputs. Yeah, we can do that. It takes time, but like you say, I mean, Bill said it very well. The top level needs to know where they want to go, but the bottom level needs to know how to get needs to work on how to get this level, and the top level needs to understand it's a really big challenge. When you are in the grid field, I mean, you use PLC, which are connectable with the latest protocol. It's easy, but in Europe, it's not common to build a new factory every week. You know, mostly we do with what we have, and this machine, yeah, we have to do with that. So we have to adapt, and yeah, that's the biggest challenge I can see on the field. And on the top of that, it's all about, okay, I'm going to connect all these machines, but how I'm going to secure these machines, because now they're connected, and these machines are not capable of doing their own security. So how I'm going to secure these machines, because as soon as you connect everything together, you can face problems on the network, and these devices are not equipped. They've never been designed to support this type of connection. So yeah, it's a lot of details, but on a big factory, it can be a huge amount of small details you have to solve to create this first stone to build all your digital transformation on, and that can be very, very challenging. And so that's for one topic. And the other topic I wanted to mention, it's still on the field. We are producing more and more data, so it's coming. But now it's how are we going to share this data, because all the solution I see about sharing and use all this data, it's IT systems, and they most of the time done to or develop or designed for the management or top levels in the factory or in the company, and nothing for the shop floor. And how and what we think in Redline, it's okay. The shop floor is probably the first person who should know where they are, how the production line is, how healthy he is, which machine is stopped, how can I optimize this production stop because the previous machine stopped, how can I optimize this time. So just by inform the people on the production line, you can increase production. But for that, you need to make a connection between the shop floor and the data. And yeah, most of the time there is no connection here. It's always bottom up. That's how you say in English. It's always a bottom up channel, but never top down connection. And yeah, we're trying to solve these issues with several solutions we provide. Redline. Hope it's clear.
So it's more of it's more of a strategic challenge than a technology challenge, is it, Michael? Would you say? In other words, strategically, you're struggling to get data from the top down.
Yeah, it's more strategic challenge because yeah, it's more strategic challenge. Yeah, it needs to be in the top level strategy to say, okay, we need this data because we need to follow what our company is able to provide or manufacture. Okay. But sometimes they don't think about, oh yeah, maybe the field needs this data. You understand? Why they never think about how I'm going to inform the field about how well we produce, how bad we produce, what information they could be interested by, how they can produce more. Yeah, but most of the time it's at the strategic level. You're right. Yeah. I never thought in this way, but you're right.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, and probably a discussion point that we can cover in the time remaining. But it may also be quite relevant to putting together a digitization roadmap, which was Sam's topic. How you go from small steps to transforming the whole business, which has effectively been the theme of our entire period. But maybe just taking some consideration to the point that Michael made of how to get that data downwards as well as upwards.
Yeah, okay. I think in terms of building a roadmap, one of the things that we've evidenced ourselves. I mean, we have a manufacturing business, 40 odd years old, that in itself has been going through transformation. And I think when you're looking at building a roadmap, the first thing you need to identify is all of the areas of the business that are going to undergo the transformation. Are you going to localize it for maybe a small part of a machine or a production line, or are you looking for a wholesale enterprise improvement? With the mergers and acquisitions that are happening and the demergers and the need to actually change and adapt and speed up change within industry. There's a need to be able to unify all of this data. So, you might have heard about the term single source of truth. So one of the things that we suggest, and we also, talk to multiple clients about, is create a repository of data that all areas of the business, and be it from the sales side, resource management, production scheduling, down to storage, shipping and invoicing, they have access to the same bank of data, and part of that is connectivity. So I think as long as you can actually start to connect, the IT environment and the OT environment, as it's called, so the shop floor environment, into sort of one repository, be it virtual or otherwise, that's a great starting point, because that whatever you connect to this one unified data source gives you everybody the ability to actually access that for localized reporting. The other aspect is look at the business in a holistic fashion. We have a process we call follow the quote to cash cycle. And in there, that all different actors are involved, stakeholders involved in that business, be it, the sales people, whether it's the marketing folks, be it the finance people, production schedulers, the production teams, managers and so on. And all of those people that come together can actually formulate a strategy that will allow you to identify generally where you need to start. And we've built a tool set around the ability to get a collective opinion from the entire business and actually create a roadmap, shows you exactly where to start and how you can actually get to your end goal. And that for ourselves has been quite an enlightening experience, because we've been able to utilize artificial intelligence into this platform, because we've been able to actually codify, expertise and experience of industry experts. And that for ourselves has been a fantastic tool to allow us to improve our own manufacturing business in a very orderly fashion. Certainly happy to actually demonstrate any of that at some point in time, but that's been the biggest change within our own manufacturing business. And we're a typical SME. And if you take our systems integrator hat off and put our manufacturing hat on, we're a 105 person business that's been going for a significant amount of time, with over 30 to 40 systems, running 24/7. So how do you connect all of that? So we have the same challenges as anybody else. And I think our lived experience is something that we've been able to share with others. And we've also learned from others as well about how we can adapt their own businesses to actually follow this entire sort of quote to cash approach. Starting small generally depends on where the biggest pain is. What KPIs are you looking to track within your business that give you the biggest source of concern? What keeps you up at night? I guess it's probably one of the questions that a lot of people ask. What keeps you up at night? Is it profitability? Is it production? Is it lost customers? So there are mechanisms to be able to resolve all of that, and I'm not sure we've got enough time during this call to be able to go through it. But there are technologies out there, certainly with this whole suite of Industry 4.0, artificial intelligence, machine learning, predictive technologies. It's about how you bring all of that together. From our perspective, remaining independent does give us a view on what you bring to the table with the client, rather than being forced down a particular path. So I don't know what the experience is for the attendees here, but it'd be quite interesting to get a poll of who are they large industrials, are they SMEs, are they very small micro businesses, and get their experience. That'd be very interesting.
Well, that's a very good point, and maybe we could conduct that survey from everybody that's registered to attend, which is roughly double the number of people we have on the call, I guess, and get some of those answers and find out about what their experiences are, see if we can tease it out of them, because I think that would be very useful information, and maybe we could take that on board. Sounds like the roadmap is is almost a webinar in itself, isn't it? It's and
I always ask the question. I always ask the question: do you have a roadmap?
Yeah. And
quite often, many people don't, because they feel they can actually start off solving little micro problems, and at some stages, those micro problems become macro problems because it isn't done in an orderly fashion.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Right. As you say, time is moving on. We've still got a little bit to squeeze in, so we're going to do this quickly. We said that we would look at related objectives. So, and we listed things like achieving net zero, efficiency, improving communications, using machine learning. I'm going to give everybody a minute to highlight what they think the most important related objective is and why. And I'm going to go top down. Which means that on my screen, Phil is the lucky man who gets to go first.
I think you just got to get your data and you've got to analyze it and you've got to understand it, but then you've got to turn that into what people care about. I think that's the most important thing. We can all do agile project management, all that kind of stuff. You can get that, but what you really need to do is make it real to individuals, to your customers, your employees, your suppliers, all your stakeholders. You've got to truly understand what the motivation is and then let that drive you.
Thank you. Keith.
Yeah, I think you mentioned some of those things, carbon net zero approaches and stuff like that. It's all important, really, and some of which, from a corporate point of view, you've got to be seen to be doing in the correct fashion. But I agree with what's just been said. Right? It's difficult to disagree with what was just said. It's important. Most of us have got the data. it's important to have that very open conversation with multiple stakeholders about what's the most pressing need. And some of those pressing needs will impact on some of those external pressures, if you like.
Thank you. Sam, Tiara, and there's a comment just come in, so I'm going to throw that at you, why not? And it says, I wonder if companies embrace net zero targets while creating their digitization roadmap. So there's one for you.
Yeah, interesting. And I think, we see it. I saw it in different parts of the world as well over the last few years. Certainly, I saw the Middle East adapt to it very, very quickly. Looking at the greener economy. I mean, I look at it from a personal perspective. I want my kids and my grandkids to have a better place than we have, better environment. But from a business perspective, we're actually seeing sustainability becoming an increasingly, larger part of our own business. And we're on the path of looking at implementing a sustainability strategy. But we're also seeing our customers are looking for their suppliers to demonstrate their carbon footprint and what their sustainability strategies are. So I think there's a two-sided approach to this. One is that partly we're going to be forced down this path, and the other is, do we actually want to go that path anyway? And the answer would be yes, we do. We've seen it on TV every day about the impact of climate change. But certainly from our business, I know some of our customers ask the question, could you demonstrate your carbon footprint, and what are you doing beyond all of that to minimize your own footprint? So we take that very seriously.
Thank you. Michael, you were nodding there, so I guess that's something that you'd agree with.
Can you hear me correctly?
I can hear you now, yes.
Headset. I mean, I didn't have battery anymore. Yeah, it's something we see also the carbon footprint consideration on the market. I mean, it's increasing. We're still at the beginning, but we see it. It's something we consider, of course, and I mean, it's natural. I mean, it's a good point. It's going to be challenging, I guess, the next years, but I think it's a good point. Market considers this point.
And how will digitization help?
Because of the tracking, because we're going to have a better understanding about the full process. I mean, up till recently, the only thing we were able to really know it's the machine itself. But the entire process, it was complex to really have a good vision. So it was complex to adapt or take the good decisions for at this level. And now with the digitalization, we really know in details how the machine react in this situation, these conditions, with this product or with this material and everything. So yeah, it would be. I mean, digital transformation will be a good help. I mean, I saw some demo about with artificial intelligence where the robot or the algorithm was capable of saying, okay, you should reduce the temperature of the oven because this parameter is too high, and I mean, a human we are not capable of detecting this connection, okay, between this parameter and the oven, where the artificial intelligence were capable of doing it. So, yeah, that's a good point.
Thank you. And that leads us back to the bottom of my screen where I have Professor Sam Turner. And I'm just going to quickly throw him the usual curveball, which you'll be used to by now. And right at the beginning of the chat, we had a question from Jonathan Wright, which said, as an enterprise recognizing the benefits of digital technology, where is a recommended entry point? He says, there seem to be so many catapults, all with individual programs. So he needs a bit of help to know which of all those different, I'm doing Bill's thing now, which of those different sites is the right one to go to, and how does he know? So that's a natural introduction to you, I think, to to talk a bit about further help.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. I saw that comment, Jonathan. Yeah, thank you. And so we're a network of 7 centres, so that can be, the landscape is confusing. And we've talked here about what's the starting point. We want to provide some kind of clarity and help, not confusion. You can certainly come to Atrium Catapult, the core team. We work across all the centres. I chair a group of all the digital directors across our centres, and we work with a whole host of partners, industry partners and providers. And so you can come to the Atrium Catapult core, via the website. You can access the people you want to start with and understand what's the need. And think about the discussions we've had here today. This debate around where do we start? Do you start bottom up or top down? I think we kind of say both are important. What we can help is understand it, and the discussion just now about related objectives as well. Is it net zero? What's the most relevant related objective? It all depends on the business need, right? What's the business winning opportunity? And we can help you understand where best to start in terms of identifying if it's a technology focused starting point, if it's a business strategy point, which part of our network or others can help you. So you can come to Atrium Catapult centrally. There's the Made Smarter programme, which is rolling out in certain regions around the UK, adoption support as well. So in the Northwest, in the West Midlands, and just getting going in Yorkshire and the Northeast as well, we're supporting that. And we've also got a network of test beds across our sites and some other partner organisations where you can come and see demonstrative technologies for solutions, test technologies out and solutions out. So we can, Atrium Catapult is a good landing place. We're kind of convening a wide community, and we can help you pick the right centre to support you. I'd like to pick up on a point Aaron made earlier, as a comment about seeing an example of someone advertising Industry 4 for £200 or €200. and I do think the starting point really depends on where you're trying to start. For some people, the price tag of, clearly you're missing 2 or 3 zeros off that, just means you don't start the conversation. And there are entry points where you can capture data and get value really cheaply. So I think you've got to understand where a company's coming from. What's the business winning opportunity? What's the pain or the gain you're trying to address? And then decide where best to start. Because it has to be a parallel top down and bottom up, clearly, to deliver the benefits. Net zero is going to be an area that's going to be critically important, actually. The problem we've got now, there's not clear standards that everyone's adhering to. Lots of different standards, and we don't know how to report, how to win business on the back of evidencing reduced emissions. A single source of truth is going to be crucial for net zero. So digitalisation will be at the heart of that. Capturing data that people can trust, that you can evidence that across your supply chains to your customers, and also enable you to target where you can reduce emissions in your factory. So I do think the net zero piece is going to become increasingly important. But if you want to know where to start, please, we can help. Atrium Catapult, we can find you the right centre, the right partners, or point you at programs like the Made Smarter programme, depending on where you are in your journey and what your requirements are. And you're on mute again, Andy. I think you're matching me. Every time I do it, you follow.
Oh, yeah. That is a hat trick now. Yeah. Only my second ever. Yeah, well, thank you very much indeed for a most stimulating conversation. And thank you to all of our attendees who've commented in the chat and put useful information in the chat as well. We appreciate all of that. Apologies that we haven't been able to cover every question. We'd probably still be here in another 2 hours' time if we tried to do that. But we do encourage you to come to our LinkedIn site, our Talking Industry LinkedIn site, and we'll be more than happy to continue these discussions with our panelists and with ourselves, and do anything we can to help your digitization journey. So once again, I'd really like to thank all of our panelists, all of you for giving up your time to attend, and have a safe journey home. If it's involving the Tower Bridge, you'll find it's flooded. So yet another reason for going on Zoom rather than physical meetings. So thank you very much indeed for your time, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.